Hello and welcome back to Must Love Books podcast. Today I am here with author ST Gibson. Saint is an author and village wise woman in training, a graduate of the creative writing program at the University of North Carolina at Asheville and the theological studies program at Princeton Seminary. She currently lives in New England with her partner, spoiled cat, and perfume collection. Hello and welcome, Saint. How are you?
Hello, I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so happy to have you on today. You have had two novels released this year,
I
which
have.
is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, today we're going to talk about An Education in Malice, and then we'll dive into evocation afterwards.
That sounds great. Education in Malice is a dark academia Carmilla reimagining set in 1968 at this all-girls liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts. And I really, really wanted to write kind of a claustrophobic, intimate, intense academic rivals to lovers love story between these two young women. That's also kind of triangulated in an interesting way by their obsession with their very demanding and mysterious poetry professor. So it is poetry, dark academia, which means lots of big feelings, lots of drama. But I had a wonderful time writing it, and I'm so excited it's out in the world so that other people can read it now.
Obviously, some of your inspirations came from Carmilla. Is there anything else that inspired you to write this story in the way that you did with the professor in the dark academia and the emphasis on the obsession with poetry?
Yeah, well, I trained as a poet before I became a novelist. So I did spend time in undergrad in poetry cohorts, which are, wonderful and supportive, but can also be toxic and drama filled, just as any sort of subculture can be. And I wanted that to kind of be the angle that I approached dark academia from because I was really involved in the dark academia subculture maybe 10 years ago on Tumblr in the early days before we kind of had this dark academia fantasy boom that we're experiencing right now, this renaissance and renewed interest in the lifestyle and the philosophy and the aesthetics and the literature. So there was not many dark academia texts that were kind of like canon cornerstone texts when I was coming up in the subculture. It was just a lot of young people in like little thrifted blazers drinking whiskey out of chipped teacups talking about Brideshead Revisited and The Secret History and Maurice. So I knew I always wanted to be in conversation with that genre. I was just waiting to find sort of the angle that I wanted to bring and the perspective that I wanted to bring. I didn't just want to do a dark academia book for the sake of doing dark academia, especially because it is such a kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It's such a legendary genre. And it's kind of still being reshaped and redefined now as people add their own books to the conversation. But one of the things that I was really interested about in The Secret History, if you have read that book, is there's a really interesting relationship between a student and kind of a mentor figure or a professor who ends up basically abandoning the students when they need him the most and kind of revealing himself to be kind of built on falsehoods and built on illusions. And I was really, really fascinated by that and the way that the right mentor or the right professor can be the catalyst in our lives that propels us towards greatness and towards achievement and towards connection and towards expressing ourselves in the best way we can. Or they can be a really toxic force that kind of causes us to grow inwards into codependence and into self doubt and all kinds of other nasty things. So I wanted to explore that duality and that double edged sword in this really intense, intimate professor student mentorship relationship. And when I was reading the original Carmilla novella, Delafontaine, I believe in that, is like a governess that we don't see very much. And I was trying to figure out, I wanted to introduce another element to this Carmilla and Laura in college story that I was spinning up. I needed another element or another character to heighten the intensity and to heighten the emotional stakes and to also bring an outside perspective. So we weren't just hearing from two young women. And when I discovered that character in the original Carmilla, I was like, oh, it's Stella Fontaine. Like she's the professor. I see the vision. So that kind of is part of the jumping off point for this story. And there are a lot of little homages and things in Education in Malice, some of my favorite dark academia albums and movies and books, but I hoped that it felt a little bit out of time and a little bit vintage and romantic while also being kind of bloody and disastrous in certain ways. But like all my books, it does have that soft place to land with a bittersweet but a happy ending at the end, I hope.
You hope. I love that. I am so pumped to dive in, and I'm actually saving it for my October TBR
Yay!
list. Yeah, I went through and I planned out everything for the rest of the months of the year. And my
Oh my
October
gosh, you're
is
so
just,
organized.
I'm usually not, but I have a lot of arcs that have deadlines, so I have to be.
Yes, I'm with you. I wasn't really able to read a lot of arcs or do a lot of blurbing over the last couple of years because I was so busy. So this year, my goal is to actually read my colleagues and my contemporaries and read my arcs and do as much blurbing as I can, which has been really wonderful and fun. And I also challenged myself at the beginning of this year. I picked some books from like backlist titles that have been on my TBR for so long that I know I'm going to love, or at least I have a strong suspicion that they're going to be really impactful to me, but I just keep putting them off. So I have gone through a couple of them and I picked up a couple more on my recent US tour at the bookstores. So I came home with little things to add to the TBR. But a little bit of structure helps me. But I'm such a mood reader that every time I try to make like a TBR list outside of you have to have this blurb deadline, the deadline is end of September or whatever. I just kind of wander away from it.
Yeah, this is my first time being like super organized and creating lists of what I'm going to read when and including my deadlines and everything. And truthfully, it's actually going well so far. I
That's
say that
good.
only being a week into it, but a week into it, it's going good.
Good, you're good.
So I would like to talk about your writing process. And
Sure.
we'll go into an education for malice now first, and then we'll see, talk about if there's any differences in how you tackled evocation. So tell us about your writing process for an education in malice.
With all of my work, I typically start with outside of the general like concept or the theme, I usually need to have like the first couple chapters at the beginning very clearly envisioned and laid down, and then the midpoint figured out and the ends. Those are kind of the beginning, middle, and end stakes that I put in the ground. And then I typically have like some set piece scenes or some big emotional moments that I want to hit along the way. And I like to leave a little bit of space in that process for exploratory writing and for experimenting into trying things out and seeing how they feel. So I kind of have a blended process between structure and planning and like experimental play. And I found that at least at this point in my career, that's been working really well for me. And I always end up getting about to the midpoint, realizing the external plot is wrong, tearing out all of the seams on the garment and rewriting it many times. But a lot of times the core themes and the character relationships stay the same. They just get bigger and deeper as I go. Education of Malice was pretty challenging. It's one of the more challenging ones I've done recently. Um, there are a lot of reasons for that, but I think ultimately it just took me longer in the developmental process to realize that some of the really big external plot choices I had made just weren't necessary and were holding me back, and I wasn't doing anything with them, so I took them out. So, like, the midpoint changed a lot. There is kind of like a monstrous plot happening that I won't spoil that was subject to flux. There was like a whole other like supporting character that was in a lot of scenes that just got completely cut. And that happened pretty late in the process. But that's just how it goes sometimes. Sometimes it comes together with a lot more cohesion earlier on, and other times you have to try trial and error more elements to find the right story that you're trying to tell. But it was a really, I learned a lot in the writing process, and I did end up finding the joy in it and finding the pleasure in the challenge. I think too, Education of Malice was my second book after getting a trad book deal. So it was absolutely second book scaries, um, which is like a phenomenon among writers where you've already introduced yourself to the reader with a first book. And that second book, the sophomore book, the sequel, whatever it is, tends to be a lot more challenging than you think because you're writing it on a shorter timeline and you're suddenly intimately aware of the audience's expectations. And for someone like me who is really relationship oriented and who doesn't typically write like in a total vacuum, I think I spent too long early in the writing process wondering about figuring out the right combination of elements to put into the book to not disappoint people. But once I realized that I just needed to write the book that was exciting and interesting to me and tell that story authentically, that the final product would be the best version and I would also have more fun, then it went a lot smoother. So I learned a lot in writing Education in Malice that did affect how I approach writing and how my process has changed moving forward. So there was a little bit more friction than usual, but ultimately I am really happy with how it turned out. It was just like a crash course in like personal and professional development.
I think it's great when your own writing teaches you a whole new way of approaching things and tackling, future projects. How will what you learned from writing An Education in Malice influence your future writing?
I think it sounds like a twee fake advice, like a little hand pat, but it's really not. It's like kind of the most powerful thing that I've learned that I can tell other people is that if you are bored, the audience is bored. If you're not having fun, they're not having fun. If you're not interested, they're not interested. And it can be really, really tempting, especially if you find any level of success or you're starting to find your right readers and you want to continue to develop that good relationship with them, or you're working with a publisher for the first time and a publicity department. It can be really tempting to be like, well, I feel unsure. I don't know what to do, which is something that every creative feels in the process of making art at certain points in time. Be really tempting to be like, well, what do people expect from me? How can I, you know, how can I deliver the same experience to them again? Or do they want something different? Should I do something different? If you get caught in that cycle of like what will please the reader, it's kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because ultimately you reach a different kind of person with every book. And ultimately, you have to write the book for yourself first. It has to be, for me at least, something that keeps me entertained, challenged, emotionally activates me, speaks to themes and motifs and beliefs that are deeply held and deeply interesting to me. And if that is there, then all of the hard work of revising and trial and erroring and line editing and all that has a lot more meaning, because it is hard to if the foundation you've built the story on is I'll just default to what I think other people want to see from me. It is really challenging then to make those executive artistic decisions based on your gut and what you intellectually know you can execute well and will be exciting to you. So just literally do it for fun, do it in a way that is the most exciting and challenging to you as an artist. And that typically leads to the best art as well.
Honestly, that was like so beautifully said. That
Thank
was
you.
incredible. I love that. And I absolutely agree. If you are not excited by your writing, your readers are not going to be excited by it
Hmm.
either. And I think
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
really good advice, definitely.
Thanks.
So now let's go ahead and we're going to shift gears a little bit into Evocation, which came out in May of this year.
It
And
sure did.
yeah, let's go ahead and dive in and tell us all about this one.
Totally. So, Evocation is a contemporary urban fantasy romance. It starts a four-book series all set in Boston, following the interconnected lives and loves and spiritual crises of a group of magicians and occultists in Boston. And book one follows David, who is a high-powered psychic lawyer who also moonlights as a psychic medium for a secret society. And he's kind of heir to this very powerful, very wealthy, long line of occultists, and he realizes as he approaches his 30th birthday that he has inherited a ancestral deal with a demon he didn't know about. And the only two people he can turn to help him find a way to break this curse are his sorcerer ex-boyfriend and the ex-boyfriend's new astrologer wife, neither of whom like him very much. But it is a romance. There is some forced proximity in a haunted house. There is learning and growing and struggling together and discovering weird, deep, deep feelings for each other in every direction. And I'm really excited, particularly to share these characters with folks because I've been working on the book for a long time and developing the characters in this kind of magical sandbox of Boston that I've created. And it's a city that I love very, very much. It was kind of the first city that I chose for myself as an adult. And it's also a love letter to a lot of living, diverse, magical, and religious traditions, which I've spent my life studying or practicing or admiring. And it's just a grand old soapy soap opera time.
And soap opera time. I love it. So, an Education in Malice and Evocation are both very different types of books, very different genres. Did you write these at the same time? Did you write one and then the other? And how did you kind of tackle these two different writing styles?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think stylistically they're really different. There is some overlap, some of which may not even have been intentional on my part, because I'll get tagged in these lovely like reviews from readers who will be like, "Oh, Evocation was such a fun dark academia," and I say, "Where?" Because I don't, and that is a helpful categorization to the reader and to help other readers find a story they like. Go to town, no problem. But initially, I was like, oh, it's not a campus novel. None of them are in school. We're never at a university. How is it dark academia? But then I realized that for some readers, that like quality of like the secret society and the doing the research in the old libraries in the late hours and kind of that magical quality of study and discipline does feel VA to them. So I was like, okay, I get it. I see the vision. So I think potentially that kind of all-consuming, somewhat scholarly desire to understand the mysteries of the universe, whether they are the mysteries of art and love or life and death and God and demons. I think that does feel dark academia to a lot of people, which I love as well. It's one of the reasons I'm drawn to the genre. So I think maybe they feel complementary in that way, but they are super different. They're written in very different tones of voice. They're set in different time periods, they're different subgenres, but I hope that they are complementary in their focus on intense, messy, complicated relationships that are worth fighting for, and kind of the juxtaposition of romance and eroticism and friendship with large supernatural forces. I think that's where they're in conversation with each other. Education of Malice, I kind of envision as a bit of a bridge book between A Dowry of Blood, which is my first novel, which is highly historical, dense prose poetry, dark, lush, operatic, written as a diary, very intimate. And then something like Evocation, which is like fast-paced, fun, flirty, breezy third person. We're on Instagram having a coffee and like bantering back and forth. And I hope that Education in Malice feels a little bit more modern and accessible than Dowry, but a little bit more stylized and out of time than Evocation. And I hope that they can act as a bridge. But also, readers can enter my body of work from any point with any book that speaks to them. But yeah, I do agree that they are different. And to answer the first part of your question, Evocation that I've been working on the longest. I've been working on Evocation for 7 years. This is year seven, year of its publication. Very exciting, magic year seven. But this has been the sandbox that I have been playing in, the characters that I have been working with and getting to know and putting into situations and putting into crises for years and years. So that's been cooking in the background. And I've kind of always thought of myself as a contemporary fantasy writer because that is really what I write the most of and always have been. I just happened to hit the ground running with A Dowry of Blood, which I love and is something I'm super proud of, and I would not change anything about it. But it's definitely a little bit of a what's the word? It's just a little bit of change of pace from kind of my comfort zone. And so it's awesome to have something that people love so much that was outside my comfort zone and did feel experimental and risky, but it also feels good in a different way to be able to show people this is my comfort zone. This is me on home base. This is me in a little world of my own design where I feel like I can share a different kind of story. And I'm super fortunate that my editors have been so indulgent and have let me tell all these different kinds of stories.
I truly love that, honestly. And Evocation, as you mentioned, is going to be a series. Is there,
Hmm.
you said four
Four,
total?
yes.
Yes, excellent. Um, do you have any kind of updates or anything that you can share about the three upcoming?
Yeah. So it's the Summoner's Circle series is the name of the series, and it is four plus a novella. So this novella is called Odd Spirits, and it comes out in October. It is available for pre-order now in a gorgeous foiled hardcover with full page illustrations. It's a beautiful piece of art. And this was the first thing I ever indie published, like years and years ago. And it's gone through a ton of revision. It's been revamped, line edited, sensitivity read, dev edited, updated for continuity and character and all that. But it is the story of how Reese and Moira met and fell in love and their kind of little marriage and trouble moment that they have as they learn how to love each other better and fall back in love. David is also there causing problems, but it's mostly about Reese and Moira. And I'm so excited I get to share that revamped version with you. You can start with Odd Spirits and then go from there, or you can start with Evocation. And then if you'd like to, hop into Odd Spirits and see what happened to set up Evocation, which is kind of how it was designed, but any entry point is good. So that is the one that comes out in October. Super, super exciting, just in time for spooky season. And it is, of course, a haunted house story. But the other three books in the series, I will not take any of the characters away from you. All of the characters reappear, but each book does spotlight a new character and focus more on them as they go through a big emotional challenge, a spiritual crisis, and have their big love story. So, book two is Reese, our wonderful, anxious Catholic bisexual sorcerer. And book two will be Moira, our local goddess and tarot reader and astrologer, who seems, I know right now, like she has her life together, but she absolutely does not. She's lying to you. And then book four is Lida, who you guys haven't seen a ton of yet, but I am setting her up for some cool, exciting things in the future. And she is a goth rock star chaos magician who is kind of like a total hedonist, and she's the oldest character. She is the most worldly and well-traveled and disastrous, and she's going to be a really fun, sexy change of pace, I think, from some of the other characters as well. But they all know each other, so it's everyone comes back for each other's stories. Kind of like if you like Bridgerton, it's a very classic romance novel formula. You might look forward to your favorite Bridgerton season, but all the other Bridgertons are still in the background for the most part.
And honestly, I'm a huge fan of Bridgerton. Love it, obsessed with it.
Me too, me too.
Who isn't? So, what is it like writing this series and taking each book and focusing on a different character? How do you get into that character's head? Is there anything that is a challenge in that, or is it just like come pretty naturally? You know where each character is going and
Hmm.
what they're thinking.
Big believer in trial and error. So when I was revising Evocation, I think the thing that got revised the most, and a lot of authors who write multi POV have told me this as well, is that you'll start writing a chapter in one character's POV and then realize that a totally different person needs to be holding the camera and sharing their feelings. So I've done like I've written a lot of these chapters, like written it as Reese, been like, no, David actually has the most to learn and to lose here. It's David. Or I've given a chapter to David and been like, he has no idea what's going on. This is obviously Moira's moment. And you only kind of learn that by doing it a bunch of times. So I do have practice with them. I have spent time with them. So it is a little bit easier for me to get into the headspace of those voices than characters I've done less development with. But that said, I definitely have like a cheat sheet of things for them that if I feel like I'm getting off track or one character is starting to sound like another or just kind of flatten out and sound like me as the narrative voice, I can add things in. So, for example, Reese is the one that uses a lot of religious metaphors. And if he swears, he uses a lot of religious language as well. Whereas David doesn't really do that because that's not a huge part of David's cosmic paradigm. He just doesn't care. Reese tends to kind of talk for longer sentences and go on little mini lectures where he's sharing his academic knowledge on things. Whereas David, who is the lawyer, is much more straight and to the point, show me the money, show me the final solution. So his chapters tend to be, or his sentences tend to be a little bit more short and choppy. And Moira has this great ability to walk into a room and read how everyone else is feeling. So she tends to notice kind of the under the surface, behind the scene things that maybe the boys don't notice immediately. And she also has some wonderful like southernisms in the metaphor she uses and the way she expresses her emotions and her anger and her boundaries that feel distinct from the way Reese or David might do it. So when I feel a little bit lost, I can fall back on those little tips and tricks. And there's even certain things that certain characters say a lot. Like David tends to start a lot of sentences with "yeah, well," and so if I find someone else doing it, that's probably a David thing. So it's just those small things that I've noticed that can help me get into the POV, and also just giving myself the time to learn how someone operates. Like I have known Leda for just as long as the other ones, but she does get less screen time in book one. She doesn't have a POV in book one. So what we learn from her and learn to expect from her behavior and her way of looking at the universe, we see through the eyes of other people. But that can also be a really great writing exercise for the author to learn what do they do to a social situation and how do they present themselves to be perceived by others. Just a lot of workshop in it. But luckily, characters are my favorite thing in the world, and I don't get bored of them. So I have the patience to just workshop it over and over again.
I feel like you should definitely teach a class on that.
Thank you. I'd love to.
You
I would
should.
actually
I
really
would
love to
immediately
do
be
more
there.
speaking and teaching. Thank you. I've done Futurescapes a couple of times. I've taught Futurescapes and I taught a writing romance and speculative fiction workshop at Futurescapes, which was a blast. And I would really like to do more teaching in the future, just as I learn little things that I can pass on. I don't consider myself necessarily an expert in a lot of different disciplines, but I'd love to acquire tidbits and tips and tricks, and then share that information with others. It's a love language, so that would be really fun.
Yeah, count me in. Let's set that up. I absolutely love like novellas that come from a series. I don't know what it is about them, but it just like really adds so much more character. And, even though they're, shorter because it's a novella, so you don't have as
Hmm.
much into it, I feel like they always have like just add so much to a character and to their own story. So I really am excited to check out Odd Spirits.
I agree. Thank you. I'm excited you're excited. And this one was particularly fun because I love Reese and Moira. They're like my ultimate married couple, love them to death. But obviously, Evocation is David's book. So even though Reese and Moira are there, they're narrating and we're learning a lot about them, most of the attention had to be diverted to, David having his turning 30 crisis. I might die. Demon's going to come get me. Also, I have no close, intimate relationships that I don't know how to function as a human being. So it was really great to give myself the space to just like lavish attention on Reese and Moira and let them kind of unfold to the audience at their own speed and on their own terms, particularly as a couple. It was really fun.
That is awesome.
I would just say for the end of the interview, if you would like to find me online, you can follow me at ST Gibson Author on Instagram. I am there quite often. I'm DMable, all that kind of good stuff. But I also, if you are interested in finding out when I am going on tour and seeing the title reveals and the cover reveals as soon as they happen and getting early access to sales and behind the scenes looks at excerpts from books that aren't out yet, I highly suggest that you subscribe to my newsletter, which is saint.substack.com. It is free. I send out an email about once a month. I won't bombard you, but there is also a paid version where I send out a monthly essay on writing craft and my publishing industry tips as well. I think we just did the last one I just did was how to break out of writer's block, and next month is should you write to trend or not. So it's a really fun opportunity for me to share my insights and my knowledge about things on a deeper level. So I would love to see you guys there.
I love that. And then, hey, there's a little way for you to incorporate that teaching into your writing and everything.
Exactly.
I love that. And I just pulled up your website and I just think this is so funny. I promise not to give your name to evil corporations or mischievous fairies.
Yes.
That's so funny.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Krystle.
Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me and have a great day.
Thanks. Have a good one.